Okay, good evening and welcome to the regular meeting of Council for Monday, May 16th. We're going to start with the singing of O Canada, followed by a moment of reflection, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Deputy Mayor for the month of May, Councillor Garcia, to read the land acknowledgement.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Quand on brasse et porte le pays, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
All right, turn it over to Deputy Mayor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We acknowledge that the land on which Council meets today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Acknowledging this is a reminder that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. And so I got a brief mayor's report, and as we had our moment of reflection, a reflection of our community was extending a condolence to our neighbors in Buffalo who were impacted by a senseless and horrific act of gun violence on Saturday. The news has no doubt hit home to many in our community. It's only a 50-minute drive to get across the border here, and many in our community have either been to Tops or has been to a store like Tops in Buffalo. Many of our community either go there on a weekly basis or go to Buffalo to enjoy all the specialties of a big city like Buffalo. And to see what we witnessed is a reminder of how toxic the combination of gun violence and white supremacist ideology and thinking can create a condition where people can be senselessly killed like they were. So our thoughts are with the families of those impacted by that violence, and also the people in Buffalo who are no doubt trying to pull things together after that that horrific incident. But while we may feel insulated here in our community and in Canada, it is a reminder that these kind of acts of racially driven violence occur here. It's occurred in many communities in Canada, and so we all have a role to play to root out and push back at what we're seeing an increase of, which is this white supremacy that's finding its footings in too many communities. So Let it also be a reminder as we reflect that we have to do our part to push back at what we're seeing. I'd also like to offer condolences to the Miele family following the death of Barbara on May 10th. Barbara was a longtime community advocate, and she was an executive director for the Downtown Association for many years. And she was also a very active volunteer in the Polish community. And so we just want to have Barbara in our thoughts and her family, and thank her for all that she had done for the betterment of our community. This week's long weekend, and we've all been looking forward to it. It's the first real long weekend of the kickoff of the summer. The Carousel in Port Luzio is going to be open for just a nickel to ride. Happy Ralph's will also be open, and it includes the new Rotary all-accessible playground there. And the splash pads will be opening soon. On May 28th, there's also going to be a tree giveaway, and it's the annual tree giveaway. And we do this twice a year. And the residents need to sign up to receive a free tree for their property. It's opening today, Monday, or to buy a rain barrel. And the two events will return once again to curbside format, picking up at Seymour Hanna Sports and Entertainment Complex. And this is one of two annual tree giveaways. And it's just another way to assist the city in its goal of reaching a 30% urban canopy, forest canopy. That's something that the last couple terms of council have been very focused on, and the investments that are being made and working with the private sector or our private residents is really one of the key goals of getting our tree canopy up to 30%. So another way of how council is pushing back at climate change. Also, the Garden City Golf Course is open, so those who want to participate and hit the links, you're more than welcome to do so at the city-owned 18-hole golf course. It is looking to be in great condition this year. There's great affordable golfing for the entire family. Also, the market is kicking off the return of special events. So come on out to the market on Thursdays and Saturdays, and you're going to have cooking demonstrations, there's going to be music, there's going to be a community engagement series. So check out all of the events that are going to be taking place at the market over the summertime. And as the farmers' produce is coming into season, it's a great opportunity to support our local farmers as well. Also want to draw attention to a great partnership between the City of St. Catharines and the City Transit Commission. They have lowered the cost of a family pass to just 3 days on weekends this summer. Families of 1 or 2 adults accompanied by up to 3 children can ride the transit for $3 as a family at a reduced rate to any destination in the City of St. Catharines. This pass is available Saturdays and Sundays and holidays through September 4th, and you can purchase the pass through the transit app or at the fare box. And so I just want to give a special thanks to Transit for making that adjustment in terms of the technology. And I also want to acknowledge Councillor Carrie Porter, who pushed this initiative forward. You know, when we talk about trying to create value for members of our community, trying to make things more affordable, and also being a part of a climate change initiative, these are the kind of actions that are meaningful for both families and the environment. So Councillor Porter, thank you very much for your leadership on that. Also like to acknowledge the efforts of Sandy Middleton for her longtime service at the city's Arts and Culture Advisory Committee. Sandy resigned from the committee after serving since 2011, including the past 3 years as chair. Sandy is a very accomplished artist in our community, and she is also involved in the Robin Hall Task Force and the SKIP subcommittee. So I just want to thank her on behalf of council for all her years of service. And listening to O Canada at the opening of council, while a number of Leaf fans will not hear that anthem for many, many months to come, if you're a Falcons fan, you'll hear it this Friday at the Jack as they won the Golden Horseshoe Championships on home ice. They beat Hamilton Kilty Bees 1-0 in a very exciting game. About 900 of us joined together to watch them at the Jack. And they play this Friday in the Sutherland Cup, and it's they're in a round-robin playdown. And they play Chatham on Friday. So they start tomorrow night in Chatham and then at Jack on Friday. So let's pack to Jack, as it would be wonderful to see the Sutherland Cup come home to the Jack one final time before we close it. And with that, I can go to Carousel Players celebrating its 50 years of entertaining young audiences. I just want to say thank you to Carousel Players for creating such a wonderful experience for young people. And it was founded in 1972 by Desmond Davis, a drama professor at Brock University. The company has performed 214 productions to more than 2.8 million children, youth, and families. And anyone living in St. Catharines over that period of time, growing up, you will have known the Carousel Players. So I just want to say congratulations to them. And I'll end it off with the Niagara Roller Derby returns to the Hague Bowl, Saturday, March 28th. Doors open at 5:30. Real exciting entertainment taking place at the Hague Bowl. If you want to come out and watch the Niagara Roller Derby, please feel free to do so. It's a family event. And I will end it there, turn it over to the Deputy Clerk, Donna. Nice to see you. Welcome to I guess what do they call this? It's not the podium.
The diocese.
The diocese. Mm-hmm. Welcome to the diocese.
Thank you.
Okay, turn it over to you.
The following amendments are being made to this evening's agenda. Item 8.1, presentation from the City's Integrity Commissioner. And item 9.1, update report, elected officials' remuneration will be discussed prior to item 7.1, the public meeting regarding traffic accident cost recovery and required bylaw amendments. There are two amendments for the wording in item 7.1, Appendix 1, under the heading 2022 fee. The text should read 10% of total damages, administration fees for recovery of damages, and damage-specific costing. And Appendix 2, under the heading Conditions and Other Requirements, the text should read Form of Document Approved by City Lawyer. Amendment to Item 6.1, COVID-19 Implications on the Strategic Plan. Page 4 of the report will be updated to include updating the culture plan and the relocation of outdoor art to public spaces within the downtown as part of the accomplishment highlights for the Cultural Renaissance Pillar. The following items of additional correspondence have been placed in Council Sugar Sink folder. Confidential memorandum from Deputy Clerk regarding vacancy appointment for the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
All right, so that is the update to the agenda. Are there any other amendments to the agenda, save and except for removing 9.1 up to just after the presentation by the Integrity Commissioner? And that'll be moved up 9.1. Are there any other changes to the agenda? I'm not seeing any hands up. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Porter, seconded by Councillor Littleton. All in favor, show of hands. So the agenda has been carried. And then we'll go any conflicts of interest. Now we have Councillor Littleton and then Councillor Dodge.
I sent it in. I have a conflict of interest with, I'm just scrolling, sorry. It's committee minutes for, I believe it's the Cultural Sustainability Committee?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's the Sustainability.
Thank you. Yes, I've declared a conflict as I am a landlord. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sent a message into the clerk earlier today that I have a pecuniary interest in presentation 8.1, not 6.1. I had inadvertently put 6.1 and I corrected it, and it is to do with 8.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. And I have a conflict on one of the bylaws, which I will not be a signature to. Okay, and seeing no other conflicts, now adoption of the minutes. So we do have minutes that were from April 7th and April 25th. If there's no changes or errors or omissions on the minutes, I'll look for a mover. Councillor McPherson, Councillor Garcia, thank you very much for that. All in favor? And that's carried. And now we go to consent items. Item 6.6, Subcommittee 6, Correspondence. Councillor Kushner, you're lifting that one. Do you want to ask the question as it's correspondence? Do you want to just ask a question now and then we'll just keep it as correspondence?
Yeah, I can ask now. And the question is, when will the staff report be forthcoming to Council? I thought it was the end of the month, May 31st or 30th. Is that correct?
To the CAO.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. May 30th is the intended date.
Okay, and this correspondence will be addressed for that report?
Correct.
Right. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Any other lifting of any items from the consent agenda. I'm not seeing any hands up. I need a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda. Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Phillips. And I will turn it over to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Miller?
Yes.
Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes.
Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, so I'm just going to do we do have some presentations today. So council chambers and all municipalities in our country represent the seat of local democracy. That many acts that govern us understand the necessity of the collective voice when decisions are being made to grow our spaces, pass our bylaws, and seek opinions into very complex issues. We recognize the right of the majority to decide, the minority to be heard, and the public to have the opportunity to participate, and all participants to be treated with courtesy and respect. It is imperative that elected officials, citizens, and staff have input, and it is paramount that we listen to one another and question one another, but that we understand we do this in a way that never undermines any person's abilities or dignities in our chambers. So we have a presentation now. It's the Integrity Commissioner for the City of St. Catharines. Council will hear a special presentation from John Mascarin, partner, Aird and Burles LLP, and John Pappas, associate from the same law firm regarding code of conduct reports prepared by the city's Integrity Commissioner concerning Councillor Porter and Councillor Dodge. So I now call upon Mr. Mascarin and Mr. Pappas, and turning over the mic to both of these individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm John Mascarin. I'm here with my colleague, John Pappas, this evening. Mr. Pappas has been the lead investigator on both of the reports that you have in front of you tonight. He was the lead investigator on an earlier report and was the lead investigator, has been the lead investigator on 4 other reports that will be forthcoming to you shortly. 4 matters, I think, in 2 reports coming forward in the next few weeks. I thought it'd be appropriate to introduce Mr. Pappas, and he will be speaking primarily to the second report, that is Code of Conduct Complaint 2021 06. I will speak very briefly to the first report, report 2021-05. Our reports, you've heard this before from me, our reports essentially speak for themselves. Tonight you have 2 reports, one on which does not find a contravention. That's the first report, and there's really no role for council in this report. It's provided to you for information purposes, and since we were here to speak to the second report, I'm just going to take up just a few minutes of your time to speak to it, but there is no decision for council to make. Council only has jurisdiction and authority to make a decision when there is a recommendation put forward if there has been a contravention of the code of conduct in a report. So that's not the case with respect to complaint and the report, the first one, 2021-05. The allegation was in this report, in this complaint, that Councillor Carrie Porter had contravened multiple provisions of the Code of Conduct through her actions related to 2 separate social media posts which related to the 2021 federal election, and in particular against an individual who was the candidate that represented the Green Party of Canada for the St. Catharines electoral riding.
So John?
Yes.
So I just want to ask, as my role as chair. So in the first report, you found no contravention. So why are you going into so much detail?
I will not be going into much detail at all, Mr. Mayor, and if you'd like, I can just stop right there.
Okay, let's stop right there. And yeah.
I have reported previously, the last time I was here, there were 2 reports as well, and I spoke to one where there was no contravention. I'm happy to speak there if you don't need me to say anything further.
Yeah, I think we can stop there, and then we can If there are questions of the report, which you found no findings of against the code, if not, you can go into the second one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Then I won't have anything further to say. I'm happy to answer any questions, or Mr. Pappas is on that report. So then I'll turn it over to Mr. Pappas, who can speak to complaint 2021-06. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mascarin, and thank you, Your Worship and members of council. As Mr. Mascarin had indicated, I'm here tonight to speak to one of our two reports, being Integrity Commissioner Report on Complaint 2021-06. This complaint was filed with our office in November of 2021, and it alleged that Councillor Dodge contravened the code by attending and participating at a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment. Now, the complaint made two main allegations that engaged the provisions of the code. First, it alleged that the statements made by the councillor to the committee during her presentation constituted discrimination against, quote, students. Though that allegation engaged sections 4.1 sub E and 9.2 of the code, which deal with discrimination against identifiable groups. The second allegation was that the councillor's attendance at the hearing, as anything more than an observer, was an improper use of influence, which engaged section 10.1 of the code. As you'll see in our report, we found that the second aspect of the complaint, being the allegation of improper use of influence, was sustained. We, on the other hand, did not find that the first allegation of discrimination was sustained. The inquiry process that we followed is set out in quite a bit of detail in our report, but I wish to note that in our intake and review of the complaint, we had additional correspondence with the complainant to request additional information and further particulars about the complaint. We then proceeded with the procedure outlined in Council's complaint protocol, which forms part of the Code of Conduct. In addition to that, we reviewed all the materials that were put forward to us, in addition to additional materials that were provided by the city and a video of the Committee of Adjustments hearing. The councillor was also provided an opportunity to present submissions through the course of our investigation, and in addition to that, to review and comment on our draft report of findings before it was finalized and provided to the council. The councillor was able to provide comments during two phone calls that we had with her, providing comments on the draft report, which were considered and integrated into the final report that's before council tonight. A bit of a background on the complaint. As I mentioned, the allegations dealt with a virtual hearing of the Committee of Adjustment held on October 20th, 2021. There was an application made by an owner of property in the councillor's ward, the Grantham ward, that proposed minor variances to the city's zoning bylaw, which would be used to facilitate the construction of an additional accessory dwelling unit in the basement of an existing single detached dwelling. And I won't go into too much detail about the minutiae of that application, but essentially this condition was allowed as of right, and with the permissions sought by the applicant were to expand the size of that use, not necessarily to permit it as of right. A technical report was prepared by city staff, and it recommended to the committee that it approve the application. That report also noted that there were no objections or comments received by staff from various commenting agencies or city departments. On the other hand, the committee also received several objection letters from residents in the area who were opposed to the application. Speaking in very broad terms, the general themes or subjects that the residents spoke to were the proposed increase in density, the impact of additional units on properties in the surrounding areas, and traffic impacts in the local area. Underlying all these concerns were an additional concern about the future use of the property as a student residence, having an additional dwelling unit in the basement of an existing residential building. So the committee considered this application at a virtual hearing held on October 20th, 2021. The committee started its consideration of this item by hearing from the applicant's architectural consultant, who spoke to the committee and answered questions. Following that, there were several deputations from residents who all spoke in opposition of the application. Following deputations from the residents, the councillor then presented to the committee. When the councillor joined the Zoom meeting that was used to facilitate the committee's virtual hearing, she appeared with the screen name Councillor Dawn Dodge, which we understand is her default Zoom name. When she spoke to the committee, the councillor made representations and submissions in opposition of the application. And in doing so, she indicated the following. She indicated that she was attending on behalf of her residents to represent her residents. She largely reiterated the comments that were from the residents in opposition to the application. She expressed concern about approving the additional dwelling unit within the existing building, and she also made some comments about the types of individuals who might end up living there. After its deliberations, the committee voted to refuse the application in a vote of 4-1. And it's our understanding that the applicant later appealed this decision to refuse the application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So the complainant's two submissions were as follows. First, as it relates to section 10.1 of the code, the complaint alleges that the councillor's participation at this virtual hearing of the committee as anything more than an observer was inappropriate, and she should not have used her position to attempt to influence the committee's decision. On the second front, on the portion of the complaint alleging discrimination against students, the complaint alleged that the statements made by the councillor were discriminatory to students who could possibly live in the community. Now, the councillor, through her response submissions to our notice that a complaint had been received, indicated that she was not aware going into it that her presence and her participation at a committee hearing was inappropriate. She attended in an attempt to try and represent her constituents who expressed concerns about this particular application. The councillor also admitted that her use of the examples of students as potential future residents of that dwelling unit was just an example, was not intended to mean that students were not welcomed in the community. In our review and consideration, we took into account all the circumstances and all the submissions of both the complainant and the councillor, and on a review of the evidence, on a balance of probabilities, we found that the councillor did contravene section 10.1 of the code, which deals with improper use of influence. We also found, as I mentioned at the outset of my presentation, we also did find that the councillor did not contravene the code provisions on discrimination and harassment. Speaking to the substance of the complaint, it's important to note what the standard in the code sets out. Section 10.1 of the code states that a member shall not use the influence of their office or appointment for any purpose other than the exercise of his or her official duties in the public interest. At its core, what this section seeks to prohibit is a member of council using the power or the clout associated with their position as a member of council for any reason other than their official duties as a representative of their constituents on the body that is council. Now, it's important in this case to also consider the roles of both the councillor and of the committee, and especially of the committee. First, as a member of council, all members are elected to represent the many and diverse views, interests, and opinions of their constituents. While a member acts as a, quote, representative of the city, they do so in conjunction or in connection with the other members of council. It's important to note, and as I'm sure you have heard and will continue to hear, an individual member of council does not have any independent authority to bind the city except when voting with a majority of the other members of council at a duly constituted meeting. Now, the representative role of a councillor is one that's engaged on a day-to-day basis. But while municipal councillors are representatives of their constituents, councillors are not advocates in the sense that a lawyer or an agent or a paralegal might be. They do not bear a duty to act on behalf of any one or more specific interests or individuals that might have issues or questions. To the committee's role is an equally important point to consider here. The Committee of Adjustment has a very specific statutory role under the Planning Act. It is authorized to independently make decisions on requests for relief to the city's various zoning bylaws. The committee must apply the 4 tests as they're known under the Planning Act in considering whether or not to grant an application for relief. Unlike a committee of council, like an advisory committee or a standing committee of council, the Committee of Adjustment is intended to be independent, quasi-judicial, and adjudicative. While it's appointed by council, the committee is in no way answerable to council in the same way that an advisory committee might be. It's not bound by any specific direction or decision that city council might give, and it's intended to operate entirely independently of council. Central to our consideration of Section 10.1 of the Code and interpreting the interplay between members of council and the committee are 2 important concepts. First is natural justice and procedural fairness, and the second is judicial independence, which is an aspect of natural justice. Every person that comes before the committee is entitled to be treated in a procedurally fair manner and to be afforded a fair hearing process that accords with the principles of natural justice. Now, this can range from anything from participatory rights to procedural rights within the hearing process, but an important component of this is the second doctrine, judicial independence. Quasi-judicial, administrative, and statutory decision makers require a degree of independence from political influence to make decisions. Now, this isn't just the case where a decision is made based on some actual influence, but the public must also have full faith that administrative processes are based on the merits of the case and not out of fear of any undue political influence. Now, taking these 2 concepts together and considering the role of the committee and the role of the councillor, any actions, any submissions, or any representations that might appear to have an impact or influence on the committee's impartiality and independence would compromise these 2 important doctrines. And in fact, the idea that politicians should not be appearing before these types of adjudicative boards and tribunals has also been adopted elsewhere. At both the provincial and the federal level, there are parliamentary conventions that ministers and members of cabinet are prohibited from appearing as an advocate or supporter before various provincial decision makers, such as boards, tribunals, or even administrative agencies. In the municipal context as well, the concepts of judicial independence and undue influence have also been recognized by at least 2 other integrity commissioners. The former City of Toronto Integrity Commissioner, Mrs. Jepson, drafted an advisory report to Toronto City Council in 2016 when it was considering establishing what's now the Toronto Local Appeal Body. Now that body sits in appeal of the city's Committee of Adjustment, but similarly is entitled to a process which is judicially independent, impartial, and free from political influence. And in that case, the Integrity Commissioner recognized that it would not be appropriate for members of council to appear as a representative to speak to a particular case that would be currently before the Toronto Local Appeal Body. In their report, and as noted in our Integrity Commissioner report, in some circumstances, it might be appropriate for a member of council to seek a decision of council as a whole to take a particular position or take particular action in respect of a particular case. But again, as I mentioned at the outset of my presentation, no member of council has authority to bind the city. If any decision is to be made, it must be made by a majority of members at a duly constituted meeting. In addition to the City of Toronto's Integrity Commissioner, the City of Ottawa's Integrity Commissioner, former Integrity Commissioner, I should say, Mr. Marlowe, also provided advice to a member of council that they were not to appear before the city's Committee of Adjustment for the very same reasons that we've discussed in our report. The purpose of this is to preserve the public's view of the independence and impartiality of the committee's process. Not only must the committee's process actually be free from undue influence, but it also must appear to be free from undue influence to preserve the efficacy that the public has, that the process is unfolding on its merits and not for some extraneous reasons. So with those principles in mind and with those previous findings in mind, we'll then come back to the councillor's actions and the facts that were before us. In our view and in consideration of the relevant evidence, it was our opinion that the councillor did contravene Section 10.1 of the Code by appearing before and making representations to the Committee of Adjustment at its hearing. The evidence was clear that the councillor was attending in her capacity as a member of council. The application was not her own personal application. She was not acting as an agent or hired agent in a professional capacity. But when she was asked to and did speak on behalf of the residents who were in opposition to this application. When the councillor attended, she made oral submissions to the committee in opposition of the application. She then took on the role of advocate for specific interests and specific individuals who opposed that application. And while many of her statements were reiterative of statements that were made by residents, they became her own when she adopted and made those submissions. Any reasonable observer, having viewed the matter in context and with a view to the role of the committee, would have perceived these submissions as an attempt to influence the decision of the committee, and would also have concluded that her submissions, being a member of council, would have had a level of weight or influence that would be greater than that of a general member of the public. Lastly, the content of her statements, again, a reasonable observer would have concluded that they constituted an attempt to influence the committee to make a decision to refuse the application. The statements were not neutral. They were not purely fact-based, but rather were swayed in opposition to the application. And understood in this context, the submissions were an attempt to persuade the committee to make a particular decision. Regardless of what the outcome of the committee's decision is, these actions were inappropriate for members of council to take, having regard to the role of members of council, the role of the committee, and the importance of judicial independence that attaches to the committee's process. In light of our findings and in light of the circumstances of the matter, we recommend, and you'll note in our report on page, page 12 of 12, in light of the circumstances, we recommend the following. We recommend that council issue a reprimand for the councillor's contravention of the code, and we also recommend that council adopt a remedial or corrective measure of asking an apology for the terms that are outlined in the report. We've had an opportunity to discuss this matter with the councillor, and she's indicated that she's prepared to make an apology for her actions, and she has in fact consulted our office to ask for advice on the content of an apology. So with that, if there are any questions from the members, I'd be happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pappas. We got a couple questions. We got Councillor Kushner, Councillor Garcia, Councillor Phillips. So Councillor Kushner, you're first up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question I have, if the chair of the committee asks the councillor if they wish to speak, and the councillor does so, will the councillor still be in contravention of the code of conduct?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Kushner. Yes, our opinion and our interpretation of the code is that any representations, one way or another, made to the committee would constitute or could constitute an attempt to influence the committee's decision. Now, of course, that would be very fact specific, and we can't speak to every situation that might come about. But the fact of being asked by the chair for one's view or one's opinion, the response should be that the member is only participating as an observer of the process and not taking any position or making any representations or submissions to the committee.
But I've attended many meetings, and I'm aware that I'm not allowed to participate. But on the other hand, if the chair asked me if I wish to participate, I would find it somewhat awkward. I would find it awkward to say no, because my residents would say, why were you not willing to participate when the chair asked you to? And surely the chair must take some responsibility for asking a question of that type.
Through your worship, yes, I would understand the position that a councillor might be put in, having been asked a question by the chair, but the response should be that in order to preserve the independence of the committee's process, that the councillor shouldn't take a public position for or against, and that wouldn't preclude the councillor in some circumstances from taking other actions to seek a decision of council on a particular application if it feels that, or if they feel that the city's interests are engaged or so deeply engaged by an application.
Okay, Evan, I fully understand that. Now, if it's an honest error, especially at the invitation of the chair to speak, is that a mitigating factor?
Through you, your worship, and it certainly is, and it certainly was in this circumstance, although not explicitly stated in our report. In view of the circumstances, we understand the position that the councillor was in when she made her submissions, and that was taken into account in formulating what our recommendation on a penalty and recommended remedial action is.
And secondly, you indicated that in many cases, councillors are prohibited from attending the Committee of Adjustment. That is not the case for our council. That is my understanding. Is there any explicit instruction in our code of conduct for a councillor, A, not to attend, and secondly, not to attend and make representation?
Through you, your worship, I'm hoping that our report was clear enough, but I don't think we've taken a position, nor in my presentation today, that there's anything that would absolutely prohibit a member of council from attending and observing a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment. That is certainly within the permitted scope of conduct. What goes beyond that permitted scope is taking positions and actively making representations to the committee for or against. And to your point about there not being a particular prohibition in the code, the code of conduct isn't meant to be a recipe. Really what it is, it's a guideline and standards that need to be interpreted and understood in the context. It can't be understood as a recipe book that sets out the entire scope of conduct or the answer or an encyclopedia. You have to understand the principles and the concepts that are engaged by the provisions of the code and apply them to a particular factual circumstance. And in this case, the provision on undue influence would apply not only to the Committee of Adjustment, but certainly could apply to other city decision makers that are engaged by that provision.
Councillor Cushman?
And yes, one more question, Mr. Mayor. You indicated that as councillors, we are not advocates for our citizens. Well, many times when we have a council meeting, we advocate for our ward constituents, and then it's up to the other councillors to make a more judicial decision, given the evidence that we're providing to our council. So are you saying it's incorrect for us to advocate for our ward residents?
Through you, your worship, I think the difference might be in the understanding of the word advocate or advocate. By no means should our report be construed as saying that members of council can't advocate in the colloquial sense for a decision of council as a whole. But what our report is meant to be understood as is that members of council cannot stand as a judicial representative or agent of a particular interest or person in the same way that a lawyer might appear before a court to represent their client or a paralegal for that instance, or another agent or representative in that capacity.
Okay, my last question is one of clarification. If a councillor does make an error, violates the code of conduct, but does it as an honest error rather than a deliberate error, is there a difference?
Through you, your worship, and pardon me, I don't have the complaint protocol up before me, but there is a provision in the complaint protocol that in taking to account or considering what an appropriate recommendation on a penalty or remedial action could be, that is certainly a consideration that the Integrity Commissioner can have. It doesn't obviate or exculpate the contravention. In other words, it's not a defense for the contravention, but in considering an appropriate penalty or mitigating penalty or remedial action, it could be considered a mitigating factor, especially when coupled with a request for advice from the Integrity Commissioner or a request for some advice from staff about the particular obligations in the code.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kushner. I will remind Council at orientation, both in 2014, 2018, there was a clear outline of what our roles and responsibilities would be. So this was covered under the orientation. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you just took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say, reiterating what Councillor Kushner said, that I attended both of those orientation sessions, and I do not believe anyone ever made a specific direction or explanation that we were not to attend or make representations at the Committee of Adjustment. That's my memory anyway. But my question is, we do understand, though, that the Committee of Adjustment is independent of Council and it doesn't report to Council, which is something Mr. Pappas has emphasized. And it seems to me that if we are expected to understand that, so is the Committee of Adjustment. So if the Committee of Adjustment fully understands that they don't report to Council and that they're independent of Council, how could the Council, having spoken at the Committee of Adjustment, be seen as undue influence and say, no, we have no influence?
Your Worship, if I can answer that.
Yep.
And I conducted the training for council back in the orientation, and let me just say very clearly, I reiterate the words that Mr. Pappas used. I was very clear that the Code of Conduct does not set out every possible situation on which council could possibly contravene or be found to not have contravened something. It sets standards, and they are to be applied. It's not an encyclopedia where you can look up every single instance. If you had asked Councillor Garcia the question of me, would it be appropriate for a member of council who is responsible for appointing a member of the Committee of Adjustment to appear before them and state, I am a council member appearing before you, I would have said that is inappropriate. The question wasn't asked, and there is a myriad of other questions that could have been asked. So I'll respond to that in that way. That's what I want to say, and I'm sorry if I interrupted Mr. Pappas in his answer.
Councillor Garcia. Thank you, Mr.
Pappas. Thank you for that, Mr. Mascaron and Mr. Pappas. Well, I certainly disagree. As I said, I feel it's being unfair to Councillor Dodge when we do not have a clear direction that we cannot attend and or make representations to the Committee of Adjustment to find that she violated the Code of Conduct. Those are my comments.
Councillor Phillips, you're next.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Pappas. Did, in fact, or are you aware whether the chair of the Committee of Adjustment asked Councillor Dodge to speak?
Through you, Your Worship, in reviewing the video of the virtual hearing of the committee, the chair noticed that the councillor was in attendance at the meeting and did ask if they wished to make a submission. In no way, in my recollection of that video, in no way did the chair force the member to speak or indicate that she was required to make any submissions. But there was a prompt, I suppose, by the chair of the committee.
Is that unusual?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not certain what is usual or unusual practice. I will note, though, that the chair noticed that the councillor was online on the meeting and asked if the councillor was interested in making submissions.
Okay. Well, in my mind, it's somewhat of an invitation. Then, if you're going to do that, then you should expect an honest answer. In whether it's representing, and Councillor Dodge does represent her residents all the time, and being her ward mate, I'm always impressed with the way that she does that. But to me, that's a determining factor. If she is, in a way, allowed to speak or invited to speak, well, then you would expect her to give an honest answer. But that's just my comment. I agree with my fellow councillors. And going forward, we have to write it down so that it is somewhere in our code of conduct, whether we should not be allowed to attend a committee of adjustment hearing and definitely not to speak at them, because it has to be, there can't be any gray area. There has to be black and white. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Pappas. Mr. Pappas, you've made the point that it is acceptable for a councillor to attend a committee of adjustment as an observer, but it's not acceptable for a councillor to be there and make a deputation. I have been to committee of adjustments hearings, and you know, the presence of the councillor with a group of residents, to me, the people who sit on the committee are given a pretty direct message that the very presence of that councillor, it's clear that they're there in support of the residents. So I don't know how we can make it just seems to be a pretty fine distinction between just presence and actually making a presentation. I just wonder if you could speak to that, because I think there's still an influencing factor just by the presence of a councillor being there without having said anything, without saying anything.
Through you, Your Worship, certainly committee of adjustment hearings are required to be open to the public, and any member of the public, including a councillor, is intended to attend and appear. While the circumstances might vary and residents might be mobilized for or against a particular application, it's the fact of the appearance coupled with making representations to a particular case that would be violating the code. The attendance as a mere observer, as we mentioned, whether or not someone might construe that as being for or against, the member hasn't spoken. They haven't stated their position or their interest, and depending on the facts, that wouldn't necessarily be a contravention of the code in the sense that it would unduly influence the decision of the committee. It's the attendance coupled with representations for or against, or anything that could be construed as a statement for or against would be what contravenes the code.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do think, though, that it sends a clear message if a councillor's there with a group of residents as to what side they're on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. Councillor McPherson.
Through you to Mr. Pappas or Ms. Guerin, I just recall from my recent attendance or my recent councillor training, since I'm new to the position, that it was part of it was made pretty clear to me that it was not something, the Committee of Adjustments is not something that you are to speak at or attend. But the other question I have, or the question I have, is at any point did the chair of the committee give councillor an opportunity to stop commenting, or was there any comments from the chair regarding the councillor's comments?
Through you, Your Worship, based on my recollection of the video recording of the virtual hearing, the one instance where the chair, and pardon me, the lights in my office are turning off after 7 o'clock. The chair of the committee interjected and stopped the councillor when she began to talk about particular individuals that might be residing at that dwelling unit. As you'll know, zoning bylaws are prohibited from trying to regulate the users or the individuals versus the uses of the property, and that was the one interjection that I recall that was made by the chair to the councillor.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other further questions of the presenter, I want to say thank you to Mr. Pappas and Mr. Mascarin, and I think that'll be it. So I need a motion to receive both presentations, the one from both ICs. Councillor Miller, seconded by Councillor McPherson. All in favor of the receipt of the presentations? Okay, that's carried. Okay, so we'll do the first one, which is the first one, which is 2021-05, and that's Councillor Kerry Porter. And can I have a motion to move the recommendation and file the report? And all, Councillor Littleton, Councillor McPherson, and I can't see the screen for the vote reasons, so I don't have any line of sight on where the councillors are. So if I could have a show of hands for the receipt of the first one. There's no questions. That's carried. Okay. And then, so the second one is for Councillor 2021-06, Councillor Dodge. And we need a motion here. We've got the motion on the floor, and we've already, so we got the report and then the recommendations in the report. So I need a motion for these two, and then we'll do the recommendations from the report. Okay, Councillor Williamson, do you have a question?
Can we get that motion on the screen?
Oh, yeah, it's not on the screen. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
So yeah, so I'm just trying to figure out, because we're looking at where I can't see what's on your screen, so I don't know. Okay, so we have endorsed the recommendations and in the report. So the recommendations in the report would be the imposition of a penalty of reprimand, and that the remedial action is a verbal apology to be taken place within 30 days. The councillor can do an apology today, and if the apology takes place today, then it's on the record and we move forward. So that's the recommendation today. Okay, and who wants to make the, Councillor McPherson moving the motion, seconded, Councillor Porter. Okay, we have questions. We have Councillor Harris.
As part of the recommendation, can we ask the clerk to include specific language in the future on councillors' roles when they attend the Committee of Adjustment?
Okay, so that'll be a direction to staff. I believe it's already part of council orientation, but we'll just, I guess, reaffirm that it's part of.
Emphasize it. Okay.
Yeah.
Emphasize
so
it. Okay.
we'll just make sure it's part of it moving forward, but it is currently part of the orientation. Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can we please vote separately on the reprimand versus the apology?
Okay, so I'm going to have to ask the council coordinator to put the entire recommendation from the integrity commissioner on the screen so everyone can see it. And while we do that, Councillor Miller, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, hopefully I'm come through okay. Just question / comment, I suppose. It's interesting to me that distinction about the Committee of Adjustments, the main thing I remember, and I believe it was suggested that we not even attend that. It was pretty crystal clear to me, but certainly understand where Councillor Dodge, how this situation occurred, and I'm sure it could happen to any of us. I'm just curious if, in addition to the other direction of staff, we can make direction to maybe connect with the Committee of Adjustment about councillors' participation or lack thereof, just to remind them not to, because I certainly appreciate what Councillor Kushner talked about the dilemma of being asked to speak. So if we could just make that reminder. But again, maybe I got special training, but I remember we're not even really supposed to, which I guess would surprise me if I got singled out. We're supposed to even attend Committee of Adjustment.
Okay. We will take that as well. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kushner.
Yes, first, Mr. Mayor, it's very clear that for the City of St. Catharines, we can attend the Committee of Adjustment meetings. And I recognize that some other municipalities do not permit their councillors to do so, but in our case, it's clear that we can. In fact, many of us do. But I'd like to make an amendment, and I hope it's friendly, and that council recognizes that there were contributing circumstances to the error.
Councillor Littleton. Now, it has to be accepted. To the movers, it's not friendly because it's not friendly. So you can make the amendment.
Okay, why is it not friendly, Mr. Mayor? Just out of interest.
the two movers have indicated it's just not friendly. So you can make the amendment, but it's just not friendly.
Okay, I would make the amendment then.
Okay. So can you say it again, Councillor?
And that council recognizes that there are contributing circumstances which led the councillor to believe that the councillor could contribute.
So is Mr. Mascarin still on the?
Yes, I am, your worship.
Okay. So again, Councillor, as you're making this amendment, I just want to get information or some from Mr. Mascarin. So what are we allowed to do when it comes to the integrity report? So it seems like now we're adding information to a report that you have done. So can you just provide some direction here, as you're a subject matter expert on this?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do appreciate that opportunity. I was going to, and I really do thank you to speak on this, because I was about to interrupt you. The factual findings are the factual findings, and they're in the report. Council doesn't have a role in making those findings. Those findings are conclusive. They followed a certain procedural requirements in your code of conduct, your complaint protocol, and the dictates of procedural fairness. The Ontario Divisional Court's recent ruling in Shirelli in Ottawa very clearly said the Integrity Commissioner makes findings and draws conclusions. Council's role is only with respect to the determination of whether there's an acceptance of the recommendations and there's an imposition of a penalty or any remedial measures. I believe Councillor Kushner's proposal, an amendment, should be ruled out of order. He's now indicating that the councillor was believing that she could make whatever circumstances there were, led her to believe something. That wasn't a factual conclusion that we determined, and I believe there's nothing on the record to actually prove that.
Thank you, Mr. Mascarin. So I'm going to, again, I'll ask Councillor Kushner, can you pull the amendment down based on that information?
I thought I heard, Mr. Mayor, that the chair did indicate that he asked Councillor Dodge if she wished to speak. So I think that's factual, and if that's factual, then to me that's a contributing circumstance.
Okay, so I'm going to rule it.
I would still agree with the reprimand, but at the same time recognize that there was a contributing circumstance.
Okay, so I'm not going to allow the amendment to stay on the floor, because I think we've heard from the Integrity Commissioner, and he is the individual that guides us in these complaints. So your opinion has been made, Councillor Kushner, but I'm just going to ask that amendment to be struck at this point in time. And I'll look to see if there's any other questions. The only other amendment that I would like to make to this that is separate from the imposition of both the penalty and the apology is that in point number 3, and it doesn't directly relate to the report, but that in future complaints that the identity of the member be identified in the final report. So many other communities do this, and if that can be added as an amendment, that the identity of the member who is the subject of the complaint shall be not be treated as confidential information. And so again, I think this is only fair to disclose who's making the complaint. The region follows this process as well, and it does reduce the opportunities moving forward of politicizing these Integrity Commissioner complaints. So I'll look to the movers and seconder if I can have that as an amendment as point number 3. Okay, so that's allowed to stand. And so we've got 3 points of the motion. And we can split all 3. So the subject has been asked to split 1 and 2, and I imagine 3 will also have some questions. Councillor Kushner?
Pardon me, what is number 3? You mentioned 3.
Number 3 is that moving forward, the member who is the subject of the complaint shall not be treated as confidential information in the commissioner's report. So the person who's making the complaint will be public in the final report. Only up until that time, it'll be confidential. And then in the final report, the identity of the complaint will be disclosed. Unless there is something deemed inappropriate by the Integrity Commissioner.
Okay, can we have a legal opinion on that, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Mr. Mascarin, can you provide some context to that?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I will disagree with the amendment, the proposed amendment, for this very reason. Most complaint requirements, protocols, do not require the identity of the complainant to be disclosed. The Ontario Ombudsman has written about this numerous times. No Ombudsman's complaint, closed meeting investigations, the complainant is always maintained as confidential. There are provisions, 2 of them, in your current complaint protocol that allow the disclosure of the name of the complainant or the identity of the complainant, and you leave it to the discretion of the Integrity Commissioner. You have appointed us as your Integrity Commissioner. We are a neutral, impartial party, and we, in some cases, decide that it's appropriate to disclose the name of the complainant, sometimes to the member, in order to make a full defense. To do so in every instance, including in the final report, I think would lead to a chilling effect that is, in my view, unwarranted. I appreciate that there are a number of other complaint protocols, a number of other municipalities that require the disclosure of the identity of the complainant, and I think it's plainly wrong. I don't think it's appropriate in all instances. I'll give you an example. Council member says something on social media, broadcast to the world. What does it matter who went and complained about it if it's a valid complaint? In this case, in the Councillor Dodge complaint, what does it matter who came forward and made the complaint? Whether it was a resident, whether it was a member of the Committee of Adjustment, whether it was another council member. The complaint has some weight. It has been sustained. We have found on a factual basis and on interpretation of the Code of Conduct that it is proper. Why would it be important to know the identity of the complainant in this case? And just let me say one more thing. And this is my own subjective view. I do not believe that this complaint would have been forwarded, would have come forward for a proper purpose if the complainant knew that their name would be disclosed. So, Mr. Mayor, those are my comments, and thank you for letting me say so.
Thank you. And Councillor Kushner?
Yeah, Mr. Mascarin, you indicated that my code of conduct, you asked the mayor to rule it out of order. Would you ask the mayor to rule this amendment out of order?
The people who moved the motion, so the motion was a friendly amendment, so the amendment stands.
No, I'd like to hear from Mr. Mascarin, please.
Actually, Mr. Mascarin is not the chair of the meeting right now. So Mr. Mascarin is not the chair, and the motion was moved into a main motion. If you want to challenge the chair, you can challenge the chair.
Okay, I'll challenge the chair, Mr. Mayor. I think there should be a symmetry between the amendment I made and the amendment that you're making.
Mr. Mayor, can we refer this to staff? I'm considering it not friendly at the moment because there's a lot to talk about, and I'll give an example. My complaint that I did not want discussed tonight, it was very clear who the complainant was, and I actually didn't want it to come to council because we have an anonymous complaint process, but for some reason, the way I don't know how you could get around writing this, but it was clear who the complainant was. And in a sense, I felt it was unfair to that particular complainant because we were supposed to be anonymous. I think this needs, we need to take a look at this. So I'm going to ask that you refer this to staff or to the clerk's office for a report. I do think there are cases where it would be important to know who the complainant is, because sometimes complaints come and they are frivolous and vexatious, or they're constantly coming from the same people, and we know that. So it's worth a second look.
Okay, motion to refer that part of this of the main motion to the clerks. All in favor of the referral? Show of hands. Okay, that's carried. And we'll move it on to now 1 and 2. Councillor Garcia, you wanted to break up 1 and 2. So before we do that, I'll turn it over to Councillor Dodge. Do you have any comments before? Oh, Councillor Littleton has her hand up before anyone else speaks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am not going to win any friends in what I have to say, but I do think that it's really important. What I'm hearing tonight is a classic example of we've been given some expert information, and some people feel that that's not expert information, or it's not clear enough, or it's not what they think is the actual factual information, and then it gets a little bit twisted, and then some things get misunderstood. I am really concerned that there's any blame being put on anyone for this instance. For example, the chair. It is not the responsibility of the chair of the Committee of Adjustment, who is a volunteer on one of our committees, to take any of this blame. This is not anybody else's fault. And that really is offensive to me. We ask people to sit on council committees, Committee of Adjustment included, and they do so of their own time. They are committed to these committees, and it is not somebody else's fault that they were asked to speak at a committee meeting. That's what I'd like to say about that. The second thing is, we know that the Committee of Adjustment is an independent committee of council. We know that. I'm a first-term councillor, and that is clear to me. I am very discouraged to hear that some of my colleagues who are multiple-term councillors don't understand that. I think maybe that's, again, our own responsibility to learn what our code is and to learn what we need to do and what our role is. Further, I understand that residents get upset about things that are at Committee of Adjustment. I get calls all the time about it. And this is what I say to councillors or to members of the community. I'm sorry, I can't talk to you about Committee of Adjustment. But I would encourage you to go to Committee of Adjustment and to speak to the people about the matters that are there. And you know what? I get it. Some people get mad. I've had people say to me, you're our rep. You need to go to the Committee of Adjustment. You need to go and talk on our behalf. And I say, I'm sorry, that's not my role. The Committee of Adjustment is an independent committee of council, and I cannot go there, and I do not go there. And I'm sorry if you're mad at me, but that's the way that it is. And I think we need to start telling people that. It's our responsibility to explain what our role is. There's a lot of people that don't understand, and I get it. We don't have good civics classes. We don't have a great understanding of municipal government. But when I took this oath of office, that's my responsibility. So I really want to stop all the talk about anybody else's responsibility by this. Councillor Dodge is taking responsibility for it because she said she's going to apologize. Good for her. Obviously, we've all learned from this. Let's move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Now, Councillor Dodge, would you like to speak at this point in time, or would you be more comfortable making an apology after the motion is either passed or not?
I'm not really sure, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to make the apology, so I wait for the decision for when it's appropriate for me to do so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dodge. Okay, so we'll vote on number 1, that council impose the penalty of a reprimand on the councillor for her conduct. And I'll do a roll call for this one.
Councillor Garcia?
No.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Counselor Littleton?
Yes.
Counselor Miller?
Yes.
Counselor McPherson?
Yes.
Counselor Kushner?
Yes.
Counselor Williamson?
Yes.
Counselor Porter?
Yes.
Counselor Phillips?
Yes.
Mayor Sensig?
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, on to number 2.
Mr. Mayor, can we speak?
You've pretty much spoken to both of these, Councillor. Do you have anything new to add?
Yeah, I'd like to say that I support this with the understanding that there was a mitigating circumstance. Thank you.
Okay, I think you've made that point. Thank you very much, Councillor. And we'll turn it over to the clerk.
Counselor Williamson?
Yes.
Counselor Littleton?
Yes.
Counselor Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Harris?
Yes.
Counselor Phillips?
Yes.
Counselor Porter?
Yes.
Counselor Kushner?
Yes.
Counselor McPherson?
Yes.
Counselor Miller?
Yes.
Mayor Sensig?
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, Councillor Dodge, you want me to turn the table over to you?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, that would be great. So I'd just like to state that I respect the decision of the Integrity Commissioners made today. I apologize for my actions by attending the Committee of Adjustment meeting. I know that I have nothing but great respect for the work that they do to represent our city. I understand the committee is intended to operate independently of council and that its decisions should not be impacted by any undue influences by any members of council. And I would like to take this time right now to thank the committee for their hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dodge. And I think as we all can learn from this, it's important that we take ownership for our actions. Councillor Dodge, I think you've been an outstanding councillor, and this was just an opportunity where as has been noted in the report, but I think you've done an outstanding job as a councillor. So I think we could just move on from this, and let's go to discussion 9.1, Financial Management Services, Director updated. So this is the one we're moving into, moving up, and this is a motion that I'm tabling. It's being seconded by Councillor Miller. And if we can have the recommendation on the floor. This is from Financial Management Services. This is related to the remuneration of city councillors, not the mayor. And this is why I'm moving this motion, because it does not affect the mayor's position. No decision that is made today will take effect immediately. Any decision that is made will be for the next term of council. There is an amendment being made by Councillor Miller, and it's related to the base increase in 23 through to 26. And Councillor Miller will speak to the amendment as it comes to the floor. And also included in here is an amendment from Councillor Porter. And the amendment is related to health and insurance benefits. And that will be also included in the motion, as it does include funding for life insurance, as well as extended health benefits, which is the option 1, healthcare spending account of up to $1,000 per year per councillor on all items that are receipted back to the city for healthcare. So this is a report that has been provided by staff. And if Councillor Miller wishes to speak to it first, I'll turn the floor over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is something I'd asked about, I think sometime last year, and I'm happy it's before us tonight. The amendment, just quickly, I know we've all read the report. The amendment is basically to speed up the timeline so that the correction to our remuneration or future councillors' remuneration happens next year rather than gradually over 4 years. To me, it's fairly obvious why. If we're acknowledging that this position doesn't have appropriate remuneration, then I think we want to be speedy in correcting that, just as we would any other issue that the city faces. I don't think we'd say, well, we'll get there slowly over 4 years. I'm not going to go in depth really on this. I would just say that it is an election year. I'm happy we're talking about this now because we still have 3 more months for people to put their names forward. I'm not certain that people will put their names forward just because of correcting our remuneration so that it is in line with our municipalities. But I think it might encourage some people, and I can speak for myself as someone who is a single parent and is in my 30s and isn't a homeowner here. There is a financial consideration to this job, just like there is for any other job. And I think we want to be doing what we can to encourage more people and different perspectives to get involved. Of course, everyone here brings their own unique perspectives, but it is unavoidable that this council and most councils and most positions of political power in Canada skew older, they skew male, they skew white, they skew wealthy. And I think anything we can do to encourage more people with different lived experiences to get involved is a good thing. I think this council has really benefited from the blend of new councillors and veterans that we've had. And I really honestly would love it if we saw new faces, that we were encouraging more people to get involved, and people ran against me and won. I think that would be wonderful if I run for city council again. I think Councillor Porter's amendments are important that she brought up in budget around providing other benefits as well. And this isn't a part-time job, not really. I think hopefully we all know that. I don't think it should be remunerated like it's a part-time job. And I think we should be saying to people who might otherwise not do it because they have their other career to think about, or they have childcare to think about. I think we want to say we're doing all we can to get you involved, to open that door that has been closed to a lot of people for a long time. So that's all I'll say. Hopefully council supports this. Hopefully it is key to note this isn't about our salary, it's about next council's salary. And we don't get into campaigning on this because I think, as the report correctly notes, it is merely a correction to something that has been wrong for a long time. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Okay, seeing no other, Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say I think it's important to add the healthcare spending benefits and the life insurance benefits as well. When I first got on council, my children were 8 and 11. And luckily I have a partner, and he's been able to take care of the children, and they were not quite at the age where I could leave them home alone. And at one point, I had to come to a council meeting here, and I can't remember where my husband was at the time, but I ended up having to leave my children home alone. And it went very late. And I remember, I just wasn't prepared to have childcare on the ready because it was unexpected. But if the remuneration is a little more fair, somebody who's a single parent might look at this and do the calculations and think, I might be able to do this if I can get some regular childcare on a Monday night, for example, because as it stands now, it's not really a lot. And on your council salary, you end up going to events and lunches and dinners, or you're meeting residents out for coffees, and you end up, wanting to support small business. You end up actually not taking a lot home, in my estimation, at the end of the day. And for someone who is a single parent, for example, or maybe is looking after an elder, or is just coming from a different place in life, maybe somebody with disabilities, we want those types of folks to be on council. And then in terms of the healthcare spending, I'm fortunate that my husband has a job that has health benefits because I didn't always have them. But I'm not thinking about myself, and we shouldn't be thinking about ourselves when we're looking at this. We need to be thinking about all the different types of people who we need to encourage to run for these positions. And it can be a very stressful job. Some of us come with different barriers. For example, women have a bit more of a challenge. People with disabilities, BIPOC people come with different experiences, and they might need to use health benefits or get some mental health support, even just to sustain their mental health. Doing this job is sometimes very challenging. And then I guess the life insurance, we're seeing, unfortunately, an escalation right now. I hope this type of escalation against elected officials doesn't last. But I hate to say it, there's now, I think, a risk to some extent to some of these jobs, and we need to take this seriously. So the life insurance is important. So I'm going to be supporting Councillor Miller's motion. It's not about me. It's about trying to attract the kinds of people that we want around the table with different types of experience, thinking about the barriers to getting into the political arena. And we want a lot of good candidates to put their names forward in all of the wards and in all of the races. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Phillips.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. On my screen, in reading the report earlier this week, I saw where it was recommended that we not have a parking pass, and instead we ended up with is that still on there? I can't see it on my screen.
No, I think the parking passes are still, there's no change to that. Parking passes are still included.
We're still going to have a parking pass. We won't be losing our parking pass. That's important. Okay, I thought I saw earlier this week that we were going to be losing that. Okay, that's fine. That's all I needed.
Councillor Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are we speaking to both of the motions in yellow right now?
No, you can speak to the entire motion, Councillor.
Okay. Pardon me, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, first of all, to staff, I guess. Why is it that the mayor's salary is not included in this recommendation?
It was in the report, Ms. Douglas.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, your worship, to the councillor, the mayor's compensation is going to remain the same because it had been recently reviewed, and when we compared it to where it fell with other municipalities in comparable population size, it was determined that it was not required to make an adjustment to the mayor's compensation at this time.
Thank you for that, and through you to the director, Mr. Mayor. Who approves the salary of the mayor? Do we as council approve it?
Yes, you approve the salary of the mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so speaking to the motion, the full motion, I ran for council and I run twice now because I want to help the community. I don't think we should run because of the salary we earn or to get paid. We should be there to help, I believe. Our residents are suffering, particularly after the pandemic, but they have been anyway because we had a lot of economic problems in the city. And I don't accept the argument that increasing our salary will add to the people that are going to run. If you're going to run for council because of the money you make, whether it's $32,000 or $24,000, that's nothing compared to what you could make on a full-time job. We're saying that it's either 49 or 70%. So for those reasons, I cannot support increasing our salary. I think we're there to help. And yes, we don't get paid very much and we work very hard. I certainly spend a lot of time on council, and if I were to look at it by the hour, I don't get very much an hour, but I do it to help, so I don't think we should be giving ourselves increases at this time. And that goes for the second part of the motion as well. I don't have any health insurance, and I could certainly use it, but I don't think we should be spending that money on ourselves. We should save it for other priorities and for the city. So I won't be supporting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garcia. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. I can't support what's on the floor. I can understand some elements of it. I don't think our current remuneration model is broken. I think the system that we have has worked fairly effectively. We've actually reduced some of our responsibility, at least in terms of direct jurisdiction, since we turned control of the transit system over to the region. So there's actually some, there's fewer responsibilities in a sense, and there's potentially more of that could happen if responsibilities are uploaded. And I can say technology, having an iPad, having an iPhone, has helped reduce our workload comparative to the days. And even when people started using emails, and I've been around for a while, phone calls were very time consuming when everything was done over the phone. And so technology has actually reduced the workload a fair bit, in my opinion. And lastly, I haven't heard from anyone in the community about this issue, and that's, I think, speaks for itself. I mean, I certainly wish that we had had selfishly, I never voted for it or tried to change it, but it would be nice to have had a pension as well. Now, my understanding is that we did have a life insurance policy. I'm not sure if that was removed at some point in time, but there was some life insurance at one time. Thank you.
Councillor Kushner?
Similar comments, Mr. Mayor. When we considered our salary increase years ago, it's always controversial, and it doesn't matter what you do. Some residents will say it's too much. Well, we had a residents committee make a recommendation of council, and I thought that was a very good policy. What do our residents think? And we had a broad section of residents that made the recommendation of council, and I thought their recommendation was very good. It has stood the test of time, and that's very important. And I don't see any changes that are increasing our workload. In fact, like Councillor Williamson, I see our workload being decreased because of technology. And before, we had longer public meetings, we had more interaction, more in-person interaction with the community, and the job one time was more onerous than it is now. So I see no need to have this type of increase, and I will vote against it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. And then we'll go to Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank my ward mate for bringing this forward, and for Councillor Porter for sharing some information. I think it's very interesting, and again, not making any friends at this meeting, but I think it's interesting that some folks are talking about, well, it's not this much, and the workload has decreased, and quite frankly, I work far more than a part-time job, and maybe it's because I'm new to this and everything, but while we're talking about maybe there's not as many phone calls, there's a lot of emails, there's a lot of social media responses that I get. There's Instagram, there's Twitter, there's Facebook. All of this is work. There's a lot of events to go to. There's things that maybe aren't exactly just reading reports, because I'm assuming there's more reports than there was maybe a few years ago. There's quite a bit of reports. We're talking about a $35 a week increase. I think we need to be very clear. We're not increasing the salary by tens of thousands of dollars a year. And I think, respectfully, I think that we do need to maybe broaden our minds a bit and think about members of our community. I went to AMO a few years ago, the very first AMO, and I walked into the room and 90% of the people were from the same demographic. And I don't know that represents Ontario. I don't know that really represents everybody. And if we want to get more people, the bottom line is if we want to have more people that are, like Councillor Miller said, a single parent, working young kids, the fact of the matter is it's very expensive to have housing, it's expensive, groceries, all these things. And if we're sitting here going, well, they don't need this money, this is serving. And but some folks, that's not an option. To give up time, maybe that it's a second job that they'd actually be giving up to come and do this work. It's not fair to put that on people and expect them to basically volunteer their time to do what is, quite frankly, important and critical work. And we are asking for a bit of benefits for some people that might help a family. That we're asking for $35 a week increase that might incentivize some people so they don't have to make the decision whether they work and earn money for their families, or they can also serve their community and do this important work as well. So I will support this for sure and hope that it does encourage some more people, maybe from that different demographic, so that we do have more representation on our councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Littleton. Councillor Porter?
I just want to say one more thing. There's comments about how it's not a lot of work. And I think for the councillors who use social media a lot, there are councillors who don't use social media at all, but the city's on social media, the city's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and some of us are constantly sharing and trying to put out council agendas, trying to share what's happening in the city. I know Councillor Littleton constantly shares you do share Committee of Adjustment info on your page for residents and consistently, and zoning meetings, planning meetings, we're doing that. And I don't know if other councils realize, I end up getting tons of Facebook messages, Instagram messages, and Twitter messages from residents across the community in other wards because I'm on social media. It also means if we're on social media, there's an additional level of harassment that we get that I don't think that other councillors realize. And maybe that's my choice, but the whole world, even my mom, is on Facebook. And this is how we have to share what's happening in the city with the community. So I would say that, yes, phone calls take a lot of time. We still have to do that. We still got lots of phone calls. But there is a lot of work and effort put in by some of us sharing stuff on social media, and I think that needs to be recognized, but it also puts some of us at risk of harassment, which is why I feel that we need the extended health benefits, because it does have an impact, and those who aren't on social media, you might be shielding yourself from some scrutiny or harassment that the other ones get.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. Councillor Harris.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to I'm not even sure who would answer this question, but we seem to be making a decision on behalf of the next council. Could we not just leave this and this report come back to their first term? Like, who would actually answer that question?
I don't think there's anyone really to answer the question. It's our decision tonight whether or not we want to create the conditions for future councils to have an adjusted remuneration. It's a decision. You can say no to it and have the next term of council vote on it, and you can vote it down tonight. That's about the only option that you have. Okay, so seeing no other further questions on this, so if there isn't an interest in breaking up the motion, we can vote on it as a block. I will just make a couple comments before we do vote on it, because other councillors have given an opinion. I'm moving this motion, and I'm moving this because I do think that staff have put a considerable amount of work into the report to do the analysis. I don't think we should wear as a badge of honor that we're in the bottom 10% of municipalities our size. and the remuneration that we provide for councillors is in the bottom 10%. I think that should be embarrassing for councillors to look at that remuneration and wear it as a badge of honor. I think this is an opportunity simply to adjust the remuneration and then continue on with what Councillor Kushner had talked about with the citizen group, which indexes it to inflation after that. So this is not a continuous increase. It does go back to the rate of inflation every year after that. The increase of both insurance and health benefits, many of those who spoke today have the benefits of having health benefits. So, you know, it's from a position of privilege. I think we have to take that privilege hat off sometimes and look at it and try to create a more balanced approach. And so the health plan and the insurance does allow for councillors who maybe don't have the fortunate job or retirement position that had benefits that come along with it. And this is an opportunity to create a level playing field so that other people who are younger, they are in multiple jobs or they have 2 jobs and they don't have the kind of extensive group benefits that come with certain sectors of business in our community. They may see this as an opportunity that gives them assurance that they can get some coverage through this benefit program as well. It's not a lot. It's only $1,000 a year, and it's receiptable, which means you have to prove the receipts in order to get the healthcare spending account. So this is about rebalancing, and I guess I'll just opine on this last piece. We've got to stop looking at elected officials as people who should be at the bottom of the pecking order and mistreated and looked at as if they don't deserve to be fairly compensated. But I will say, if this motion is defeated, certain councillors have made comments that they don't do this for a salary. I would expect that a motion to remove all remuneration would be the next one on there, because if you can't sit there and say that you don't want to have an increase in remuneration, that we shouldn't be compensated, that you can do it, you don't do it for compensation, and then not have a motion to remove remuneration, because that's actually a false statement. So I'll hope that council will see their way through this and allow the next term of council to move forward with a little bit more than I think what you're getting today. So I'll turn it over to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Mr. Mayor, can I clarify something, please?
What's your clarification?
I just wanted to correct what you just said. I certainly personally did not say that we don't need any compensation. I just said that we don't do it. We do it to help, and therefore the compensation that we have right now is fair.
I didn't hear the word fair, but thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Dodge.
No.
Councillor Harris.
No.
Councillor McPherson.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Williamson.
No.
Councillor Porter.
Yes.
Councillor Phillips.
No.
Councillor Littleton.
Yes.
Councillor Kushner.
No.
Councillor Garcia.
No.
Mayor Senzik.
Yes.
That's lost.
Okay. Anyone want to put a motion on the floor to reduce remuneration or no? The silence is
I'll move that, sure.
Okay. Councillor Miller, what would you like to remove it down to?
That we do this to help and we don't do it for money, and therefore we don't deserve to be paid. So let's move remuneration to 0.
All right. Okay. Need a seconder, though. I'll second that
Well, I
one.
should have 4
I'll second
or
that one.
5. Yeah, thank you.
I'll second that one. All right. This is interesting because we'll see how people's... Councillor Littleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will not be supporting this motion. I think in life, sometimes there's a value to what you pay for something. And I think that this is a valuable job. I think the work is valuable. It is work. This isn't volunteer. If you want to volunteer, we have city committees. When I took this oath of office, I was able to do it because there is a compensation. Councillor Miller and I went to a meeting maybe about 2 years ago, and we sat there and he joked and he said, actually, Lori's losing money doing this. He's exactly right. I have lost income, and I'm okay with that because there was the compensation and it was outlined for me. And because I'm raising a family, I have a daughter going to university, I have a mortgage, I have groceries, car payments, more just like everybody else. Because it was compensated, I felt that I was able to bring my skill sets and would be valued at the dollar figure proposed to bring to the city of St. Catharines and to residents. I felt I had a value, and that was being represented in that dollar figure. Is it undercompensated? Absolutely. I do believe that. And I think that if anyone is gonna vote for this motion, that you're essentially saying this job is valueless. It's worthless. And I think that there's great value in this work, and it's very important. And we do need to incentivize good people with skill sets, and that comes at a cost. So there's no way I can support this motion, and it's a little embarrassing that we do use things like, we use language, we're here to help. Yes, we are. We absolutely are here to help, but this work is different than going and picking up garbage in the community, or maybe, going for a bike ride in my community. While all of that is also valuable, maybe it doesn't require a monetary cost to it that this work does. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Littleton. Councillor Kushner, are you speaking on this one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I consider the motion to be vexatious and frivolous, and I don't understand the logic of somebody voting for an increase and then when that's defeated, voting for a salary of 0. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kushner. Any other comments on this?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I was just going to say, if this gets defeated, can I make a motion that this come back to the first term of next council?
That'll be up to the next term of council. So Councillor Garcia, and then we can move on from this.
Yes, I just want to say that Councillor Littleton expressed it very well, how I feel about this motion. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think she was talking about the value of the position. With that, we can let this stand. Also let this be an example of what happens when we try to ascribe a value for not voting for something, and then when something does put on the table that does seem to be out of line, it does call into question some of the decisions about what is a fair remuneration. I hope councillors will give this a lot of thought, and those who are thinking about running in 2022 will look at this, and hopefully in the new term of council, councillors will have the courage to not wear this as a badge of honor and look at us as at least trying to get to the middle ground of what compensation is. Just leave it at that, and I'll turn it over to the clerk for a recorded vote.
Councillor Phillips?
Nope.
Councillor Porter?
No.
Councillor Littleton?
No.
Councillor Harris?
No.
Councillor Kushner?
No.
Councillor Dodge?
No.
Councillor Garcia?
No.
Councillor McPherson?
No.
Councillor Miller?
Got to be consistent, not be hypocrites. say,
Councillor Miller? You cut out there?
oh, I said that I'm going to be consistent and not hypocritical, so I'll have to vote against this.
And no.
Councillor Williamson?
No.
Mayor Sendzik?
No.
That's carried.
Interesting exercise. Okay. So we're going to now move on to municipal works, public meeting. Notice to amend bylaw 2021-101, 2022 rates and fees bylaw to provide for cost recovery of damages to municipal property as a result of motor vehicle accidents that have been published in accordance with the City of St. Catharines notice bylaw. Public meeting will proceed as follows. Members of the public were provided with the options to submit written correspondence. No items of written correspondence were received. As today's public speaking is being held electronically, there were no members who wished to speak. The public meeting will be closed and the council decision will take place. Public meeting is now open and there is no staff presentation. So I will ask for a motion to close the public meeting regarding the bylaw amendment 2021-101. Councillor Dodge, seconded by Councillor Councillor Littleton. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Can I get a councillor to move the staff recommendation? Councillor McPherson and Councillor Littleton. Any questions on the staff recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the question to the clerk.
Councillor Williamson? Councillor Williamson? Councillor Garcia?
Yes.
Councillor Harris?
Yes.
Councillor Littleton?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes.
Councillor Miller? No. Councillor Phillips?
Yes.
Councillor Porter?
Yes.
Councillor Dodge?
Yes.
Councillor Kushner?
Yes.
Councillor Williamson? Mayor Sendzik?
Yes.
That's carried.
Okay, so we now move on to our CAO, who has a report prepared, CAO 83-2022, regarding community risk management associated with social challenges. And this will be a multi-staff presentation. The CAO will take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I start, I do have to give a shout out to Trish Sorrenti in my office. She's put the report together, and she's really been the big advocate at in the office of the CAO with all the representative partners throughout the community. So without further ado, just wanted to provide council with a context for why this report is in front of you. 2019, we brought our first report speaking to some of the social issues that we're facing in the community. We followed that up through a variety of reports. And the intention of tonight's report is really to give council a broader context of how the social issues that we're seeing both within downtown, within our parks, is starting to proliferate in other areas of city business. So we do have plans moving forward, and there will be a series of reports that will be coming in front of council for decisions over the next several months and years to deal with that. But this is really an opportunity to provide a bit broader context for council. Sorry, the presentation in front of you is, it has a lot of pictures. So I'm just giving a bit of a disclaimer and disclosure that some of the images are not comfortable. The presentation wasn't necessarily comfortable to put together, but these are the issues that are facing our staff and the community at large in certain areas, and it's a conversation that we all need to have and be able to see to be able to appreciate working forward and trying to address some of the issues that we deal with on the front lines, but are also the responsibility of other levels of government that we need to help and build some support networks. Thanks. Societal shifts driven by social challenges have created significant pressures in communities across North America, including St. Catharines, Niagara Falls, Welland, all the municipalities in Niagara across Ontario, quite honestly. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these issues and caused impacts on city operations and increased risk throughout our community, resulting in increased complaints to staff and to council. Next slide. The city has recognized the impacts that issues such as homeless and addiction has had on our city and a need to support individuals. This is why we've partnered with the Niagara Region, Niagara Police Service, Niagara Assertive Street Outreach, and other partners to deal with outreach and leveraging the system and the different mechanisms and tools that are in place within the broader system to deal with these situations. Currently, NASO actively engages individuals experience unsheltered homelessness to promote, connect, and coordinate access to a range of supports available across Niagara's homeless serving system, including emergency shelter, housing, and support services. This is a program that is run through Niagara Region Community Services, but the last 3 years we have leveraged that process and have 3 dedicated support workers working for the city on behalf of community services in an attempt to try to deal with the situation that we're dealing with in our parks and facilities specifically. From that point, we actually meet every week, every Monday morning with all the partner agencies. We have representation across our departments. We have representation from Niagara Regional Police Services, Niagara Region Community Services, NASO Positive Living, and other groups, including the Downtown Association, throughout these meetings. These collaborative efforts are a really important piece of ensuring that we're able to balance the needs of individuals living rough and those of our staff and community. We ask, this is a little shameless plug because we do speak to this quite often. We get a lot of emails that come through either social media, email, or telephone calls of people in the community who notice encampments or individuals in distress, and they send a text or an email to a counselor. They might send a text or an email to city staff. They may send it to our Citizens First. What we're asking is the utilization of Niagara 211. It's very simple. You dial 211, leave a voicemail. That then tracks and is able to trigger action on behalf of the various agencies to deal with the situation. These issues are not easy to deal with. There is very little legal authority that we have when dealing with the individuals. However, having said that, there is some very positive news in specific situations. And I just want to share one with council before I move on. So this information was provided to us, I believe, last week or the week prior, just on a specific example of 2 individuals who were able to get support. So 2 family members, both seniors, who had been homeless for the better part of the last 8 to 10 years, were over that period of time quite hesitant upon NASO's first few meetings with them, as they felt let down by services due to their continued homelessness and felt that looking for housing was pointless due to the discrimination they often faced at viewings due to their appearance. The NASO team collaborated with them to find goals they wanted to work on, including getting them both ID, assisting with outstanding tax returns, helping them get a family doctor, and assisting them in joining an addiction support program that they both are still on and doing quite well. Over the time of working on these goals, they gradually opened up to the idea of looking into housing and were recently accepted into a housing program. One of the comments from them is, "Now I can finally learn how to relax again." And that's an example of some of the things that we put together that actually have a direct impact on people that we see on the street that we might walk past or not want to walk near. So it just shows you that some of this work is getting through. Next slide, Evan. This map is really just to provide council and the broader community some of the hotspot areas that we deal with on a daily basis. It's Montebello Park, City Hall, Courthouse, Library, Market Square, Jack A. Cliff Arena, Garden City, Riordan Parking Lot, the area in and around Start Me Up Niagara, Richard Pierpoint Park, Oakdale and Queenston Street area. This just gives you a sense of where the concentration, but this does not identify across the entire city. We do have issues. We have needles throughout our park system, but I will now turn it over to Daryl Smith to provide a bit of an overview on the municipal works side.
Thank you, Dave. City staff only deal with the symptoms of the homeless and addiction crises. We are not solving the crises, and we are not going to solve the crises. And it does have a significant impact to our operations created by increased needs, resources, and service requests. Most of the encampments that we encounter are on city property. And these encampments are addressed through a joint effort, a team effort really, with NASO, the NRPS, Positive Living, and of course the city. When we go in to clean up an encampment, we actually will not clean it up unless the residents have been removed. And that is for the safety of the residents of the camp and the safety of our staff. That is why if we schedule a cleanup and NRPS cannot show up to assist, we will reschedule rather than go in there ourselves. If we do actually get the residents to relocate or enter a program, we have to clean up the camp right away, because if we leave the encampment in place, we will just have other individuals move in and take over. Next slide, please. So it's not just the obvious costs or the time involved with the large cleanups. All activities like garbage pickup or maintaining planters downtown or horticultural displays must be completed as if they contain sharps. It takes time to search for these sharps, and we have some cases where it appears that these sharps have been placed in a way that they are deliberately trying to harm crews in the part of their jobs. This obviously slows down operations, and we estimate that it takes up about 20% longer to do any given task. So to put that in perspective, that's like losing 1 day a week of productivity from our crews. There's also an impact to staff, because for staff, this was not their career choice. They are gardeners, municipal operators, truck drivers, backhoe operators, all of them are involved in cleanup. And even though they're trained for this different work, more and more of their time is being spent dealing with the symptoms of this crisis. All of our city programs, and facilities will speak to this later, suffer as more and more resources are required to address these issues. Some encampments can become quite large. Multiple people and items often have to be removed, and they're hard to access. We are working on an encampment this week we're going to try to remove. It's in Pierpoint Park, and we're going to have to construct about 150 meters of an access road to get equipment in there to clean out the camp. The camp we cannot clean it by hand. It's in such a condition. So when you think about that work that has to be done, and not just the impact of staff resources, but now you also have the impact to the natural environment, as we're going to have to cut trees and carve a road through. So you can see that this not only involves the staff that are doing the cleanup, but now we have forestry staff there, and all of these people are being taken away from other issues that should be addressed. Large encampments require more staff resources and heavy equipment. And in 2021 alone, it cost the city just over $128,000 just for the large cleanups and dumping fees for that material. It does not include the heavy equipment and the backhoes. Now, Niagara Region did provide us with $100,000 in 2021 to support our cleanup efforts, but future financial support from other levels of government is currently unknown. On top of our cleanup, our operation is also impacted through our responsibility as an employer under the Ontario Health and Safety Act. We have identified several high-risk locations where we can no longer have staff work alone for their safety. And this doubling of staff is impacting our ability to address other programs. As part of the 2023 budget deliberations, Municipal Works will be bringing forward a staffing request that reflects this new reality. Next slide, please. This brings me to staff risks and safety concerns in general. Cleanup efforts pose serious health and safety risks due to human waste, harm reduction waste, animal feces, bodily fluids, and disease transmission, mold, cross-contamination, possible violence, drug exposure, explosions, fires, mental health and morale implications, and of course, the training that goes around with all of this. Morale is being significantly impacted in our frontline staff. Many staff see this as a never-ending problem, as we will go in and clean out one camp, and those residents, for whatever reason, will not accept help through the regional programs, and will just move to another part of the city, another hotspot, where we will find our staff responding in a week or 2 or 3 to clean up another camp. And because of this, it is very demoralizing to the staff, especially as I have said before, and I get the comments, I'm a gardener. I wasn't hired to clean up human waste. Next slide, please. We're just going to show you some of the pictures of some of the things that we have been dealing with. As Dave mentioned, some of these pictures can be disturbing. Next slide, please. So, the encampments and the social circumstances around them bring a variety of public concerns. There's concerns about behaviors, whether they're harassing and intimidation or even lewd or sexual behaviors, biohazards, sharps, human waste, accumulation of garbage. Not obviously, when you see this is not an obviously inviting place for the public to go and use. Montebello was almost burnt down 3 times last year. Of course, we have vandalism in our washrooms, ongoing break-ins into our tool sheds, graffiti. We don't want to obviously risk losing a Montebello Park. That's very much a character of this community. However, staff are continuing to be challenged to find a way to deal with these issues and still make it safe and accessible for the general public. There's also, as I stated before, most of the encampments are on city properties, but we do have some cross-jurisdictional camps where CN or OPG may be involved, and sometimes there's difficulty in determining who is actually responsible, which also take additional time and resources, not just at the cleanup level. Next slide, please. Again, just an example of some of the cleanups that staff are dealing with on a regular basis. Next slide, please. As I stated previously, I just want to end, staff cannot perform these cleanups without the presence of NRPS or NASO or the rest of our team. Individuals can become very territorial and protective, and we need that assistance to keep happening in order for our staff to respond to these situations safely. When the NRPS are called and they have a more pressing emergency and can't show up, as I stated before, we will reschedule, which means we've had many resources sitting around actually waiting before we can reassign them somewhere else. I will now pass on to Director Martuccio to discuss facilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Daryl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The issues mentioned earlier extend to our city facilities as well. City staff have made various facilities available to support programs for those living rough, such as the warming and cooling centers, which provide shelter from extreme weather events, and the shower programs that are offered at the Garden City Arena. While these programs are important elements in supporting the city's vulnerable population, they can also result in safety concerns for both staff and patrons of the host facilities. Staff are often required to work in situations and environments for which they are not properly trained, dealing with situations such as overdose, sexual behavior, violence, verbal and physical abuse. In many instances, staff are looked upon for security measures when dealing with escalating situations. We are also seeing an increase in risks and unwelcome behavior at our facilities beyond the times when social support programs are being offered, resulting in the implementation of external security services to mitigate risks to staff and the patrons, increased custodial services and resources to properly clean and sanitize our facilities, increased staff to ensure staff are not working alone as a result of the threatening behaviors, frequent police and EMS activation, increased facility inspections to identify and deal with safety concerns such as drug paraphernalia, human feces, and damage to the facilities. This type of work environment contributes to the health and safety concerns of our staff and negatively affects their physical and mental well-being. Next slide, please. These are two pictures demonstrating on a small scale what facility staff are working through on a daily basis. On the picture on the left there, you can see someone has put a used syringe on a handrail on our facilities, and then some waste in our washroom facilities. Oftentimes, NRPS are called to remove individuals due to bad behaviors taking place in our city facilities, or EMS is called to deal with individuals that are in poor physical condition. I will now pass it to Fire Chief Dave Upper.
Thanks, Anthony. As you can see, this encompasses all areas of the city. It's not just isolated to one of our divisions. Fire services, as you can see from the slide here, in 2022, we've had 45 fires and we're on pace to hit 180, which is going to be a high for us. When we look at the number of fires that are being investigated, we don't investigate every fire. Some of the fires that we attend to are fairly straightforward, could be unattended cooking, and so we don't need to bring in the investigators. We have the homeowners on scene and it's easily resolved. We can determine cause and origin. Some of the fires that we have, we need to do the investigation, and this year alone, 16 of the fires that we've investigated, we determined that 8 of them have been related to either vacant buildings, substance abuse, mental health issues, or a combination of all, 1, 2, or 3. So you can see from the slides here that 8 out of the 16 fires are related to that, which gives us about 50% of our fires are now being related to these challenges that our community faces. It's fairly significant when we look at our cause and origin overall, and it's a significant increase in what we're seeing. And if the trend continues, which we hope to somehow negate, it's going to lead us to a lot of property loss, hopefully not too much trauma to our community and personal injury. Out of the fires that are due to drug abuse, often we have to enter the property to investigate, and those investigations, the last couple have not been able to be completed due to the amount of drug paraphernalia in them. Staff have contacted the senior officers on call to seek guidance as to how they want to proceed. And of course, with staff's safety being the primary concern, we've decided that we will forego the investigation over the safety of our staff. We're seeing also, when we go to the encampments, an increase in the types of materials that they're burning and the fuels that they're using. They're very dangerous. They're taking fuels and they're jerry-rigging them to cook and to keep hot, and increasing the level of risk to both themselves, those around them, and the community. Fire staff are taking action. We are currently using Sunday as a day of the week to track our vacant properties and ensure their status, and we have them listed so that we know whether they are in dilapidated condition or whether they're boarded up or they're being kept well. Next slide. We also have our staff are working on trying to get the landowners or the landlords phone numbers so we can contact them. Quite often they're out of the city, and so when we try to take remediation actions towards boarding, fencing, securing the property, we're unable to contact them, which puts our staff and the corporation in a tough spot because we need those properties secured, and now we have to engage a third party to come in and do the work on behalf of those landlords. We're trying to provide public education to the property owners as well as the neighbors to try to keep the areas clean, try to put in security measures to negate those properties being squatted in. During the open burn encampments, our fire staff are engaging a process in which we activate the folks from Municipal Works, and as you've just seen, they have a very huge process in cleaning up the encampments. We also are using 211 to contact NASO and have those folks attend the encampments as well. Fire staff, when we come across individuals, whether it's at an emergency or non-emergency call, we do provide information to those living rough as to where they can find shelter, find some of the resources to hopefully help them. As you can see from this picture here, this is one of the two of the different units that we've had fires in, and you can see from the large amount of drug paraphernalia that we've not been able to investigate those fires. Next slide. So I'll now pass it over to Director Kate.
Thank you. In addition to these challenges on city properties, staff in various departments also encounter issues on private property. Private property challenges can sometimes even be more difficult and lengthy to address. When properties are vacant or they're just poorly maintained, they can become a target for illegal activities and occupancies. Vacant properties and their lands, we've seen people breaking in, squatting, living in sheds, and as we've heard this evening, it's become an increased risk of fire, theft, vandalism, graffiti, illegal activities, and even loss of life. These undesirable activities are creating conflict with neighboring residents and businesses as well. When the city's outreach groups respond to incidences on private property, it's taking away those resources from city properties and other needs in the community. City staff do not have the authority to remove people from private property. City staff compel landowners to bring their properties into compliance by enforcing a host of municipal bylaws. This requires the initiation of a complaint and then an assignment to a bylaw enforcement officer. An inspection is then undertaken of the site to determine the nature of the violation. There's then a written notification to the property owner of what that violation is, including allowing a time for them to bring their properties into compliance. Then bylaw enforcement officer then attends the site again to verify compliance, and if compliance has not been achieved, either an extension is granted for compassionate reasons or documentation is prepared to lay charges. These things do take time. However, even in instances where compliance is obtained, if ongoing maintenance of the property does not occur by the owner, the cycle can and most often does begin again. We have also seen low-income tenants accept poor living conditions because they are too afraid of an eviction for speaking up. Some landlords take advantage of this dynamic, and vulnerable low-income tenants have also been victimized by other aggressive tenants, but again, don't want to risk homelessness for bringing awareness to the situation. Secured housing is paramount to safety. CAO David Oakes will now talk about some initiatives to assist with addressing these issues.
Thank you, Tammy. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the intent of the report tonight before you isn't necessarily to start a conversation or a discussion. It's really to allow council to understand, as we start to bring reports forward, the context for the situations we're dealing with. So just to give an overview of some of the upcoming initiatives that will be in front of council over the next several meetings. We have planning and building services are working to bring to council bylaws to address vacant properties through the administrative monetary penalty system for both waste and long grass, but also introducing a vacant property process as well to start to deal with these situations. We know our staff across the corporation know where these areas are. They know the concerns and the issues. We don't necessarily have the tools. So over the course of the next several months and years, as I mentioned, this is a problem, a complex issue that faces not only St. Catharines, but all society, quite honestly. There are initiatives that we are going to be bringing forward. The conversation isn't a fun one to have always because we don't have the answers in a lot of cases, but we do have some tools that we can bring forward. What we're trying to do is really establish a level of risk management and assessment across all communities. So when we are going in front and trying to bring different tools, we're going to bring those back to council in this context so you can have a better appreciation for what we're trying to do at the staff level. I do want to give a shout out, quite honestly, to all of our staff, all of the staff throughout the region in the various agencies that work in this environment. It's very challenging. It's not the glamorous type of work everyone expects to have. It's very difficult. You're put in very emotionally stressful situations. We have staff that aren't necessarily trained to deal with that. However, they are expected to be in areas that we know that these concerns. And we've been dealing and talking with our staff over the last several years. And this is the step, this is a continuation of what we need to do to help support them. As I mentioned, working with the various levels of government, there's a lot of advocacy that this council has done already, but there is more that needs to happen to address some of this exacerbated issues due to COVID and the opioid crisis that's facing so many communities. We're the front line. We just want, we want to have all of our parks, all of our buildings, all of our facilities as perfectly manicured as we can. Our staff take great pride in the work they do. Unfortunately, we get stuck in situations where we don't necessarily have the resources, the training, or the support mechanisms to allow us to do what we want to do. And it's a struggle we all face with at staff. I know council deals with it, and I know the community is frustrated as well. But I just want council to know that we do have initiatives. They will be coming forward, and the discussion at that time for those reports can be had. But I really wanted to provide this presentation for an overview to all of council on some of the initiatives that we're going to be moving forward on a go-forward basis. That is it for the presentation.
Okay, thank you to CAO and to staff for all their work. If there is no questions of staff because of the CAO, there will be extensive reports coming back on the different subject matters. I will just say that in my dual role as being a regional councillor as well, for people, often some in our community will look at in unique circumstances and they will say the city's not doing anything or nothing is being done. I can assure everybody in our community that a lot is being done to try and help people through these very challenging situations. I will also say that we have a very compassionate approach to working with people who are living in the rough. And so what we heard today was the impact that it has on staff. But I can assure people in our community that when we do identify that there is someone living in the rough, there is a very methodical approach to bringing in care support workers, bringing in supports to the individuals, and then working with staff and outreach teams. And then the last piece of that puzzle is bringing in the Niagara Regional Police with the city staff when a cleanup needs to take place. So I want our community to know that it isn't simply just an arrival and starting to remove. It is working with people to get them into housing before we start to tackle what has become very challenging locations. And I know the CAO has been working on that approach for the last number of years, trying to make sure that we have that balance of working with the people who are experiencing either addictions, mental health issues, homelessness, whatever it may be, but making sure we're doing it in an empathetic and compassionate way. What we're seeing in our community is obviously the outcrops of severe addiction issues related to the opioids and fentanyl overdoses and addictions that we're seeing. We do need additional resources in those spaces. And as the CAO has indicated, the city is the front lines for a lot of these. And so if people are out there and they see someone who is living in the rough, please call 211. And 211 is a very simple technology tool to use. It connects you with service providers who will take all the information down that will then send out support workers to that location to begin the process of trying to secure housing. We are in a situation where the housing is very tight in the market based on renovictions and a lot of issues related to increasing costs of housing. We are seeing more and more people present as homeless. So there is a perfect storm that has happened over the last couple of years here in our community, and we're, by all means, many communities are going through this. When I talk to Cam Guthrie in Guelph, when I talk to Jeff Lehman in Barrie, they say the same things. So anyone out there who thinks St. Catharines is the only place that is experiencing this simply hasn't done enough research because it's happening in every community, big and small. So what I see from our community is that there's many hands who are trying to help, and what we heard tonight is the impact that it's having on staff and how our CAO is going to work with the senior team to try and better manage the impact on our staff, but also provide the right tools and resources to continue to move forward. So I'll just leave it at that. Don't really want to open the floor to questions because there will be opportunities to do so. Councillor Porter, you do work in this space, so I will ask if you're open to it, just to share what you're seeing in the environment as you are an individual who has the experience of working with vulnerable people in St. Catharines.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Previous to my current role, I did work at the agency that does street outreach. So I didn't declare a conflict because I now am a manager of housing loss prevention, so we work with people. But I know a lot of people in the community. I just want to say, first and foremost, to my colleagues and to city staff, people who are experiencing homelessness are our residents and they're our constituents. And I don't think we should ever forget that. And I think it is very frustrating sometimes to deal with same situations over and over. I've been there. I've been in lots of the apartments, and this is very familiar to me. But the two seniors that CAO Oaks talked about, I think I know who you're talking about. I know them very well. And street outreach takes a long time. And I just want to say it was a very good thing that the city invested in it. And honestly, I think we might have to get used to it to some extent. We're just going to have to change the way we do things. And I think we're going to have to think about how we're compensating staff and training staff. And I think we need to be open to looking at compensation and the staff complement, because people experiencing homelessness are our residents, and we have to work with them, and it's become, in essence, part of the job. But I just want to say, knowing a colleague who just went up to the region and the volume of calls that he gets, city councillors, or at least I get more calls about homelessness than he does. So we are disproportionately affected by resident concerns. And even through a provincial election, I just don't find that a lot of residents understand who is responsible for what and what is driving the issues. And ODSP, social assistance rates have been frozen since 2018, and during this time there was an 11% increase in inflation, and 30,000 people moved to Niagara in the last 5 years. We have an additional report in our council agenda about population growth. So we as councillors, in planning meetings also have to understand that we have to be creating homes and housing for people. It's incredibly important. And I think we have to be thinking about this through all of our work. So I just want to say, like, thank you to staff for the work you're doing, but let's not forget that the people who, you know, don't have a home right now, they're still our residents, and we always, there's a tendency sometimes to dehumanize people, and I know a lot about the folks who just got housed. Their stories are quite incredible, and it, you know, street outreach does work. The recent investments in housing and some of the housing that's been built, specifically the supportive housing, is making a difference in people's lives. We just need more of it, and we need to be really focusing again at AMO on all of this with whatever government we end up deciding to elect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Porter. So I'll look to a motion to receive the report, and more information will be coming back. Councillor Phillips, and seconded by Councillor Dodge. And all in favor, show of hands. That's carried. Thank you to the CAO and staff for putting that very insightful report together. No motions have been brought forward. There are no calls for notices of motion. If you do have a notice of motion for the May 30th meeting, please feel free to get it in before the agenda is published. We have task force minutes that have been received, and that we are to file the minutes and from the advisory committees of council. Do we have a question on any of these advisory committee council questions? And seeing Councillor Porter.
The social sustainability meeting minutes, they approved the task force report, the Equitable Recovery Task Force, and I believe that staff are working on adding to that report, potentially clerk staff, or Bonnie was working on something. Is this coming back to council at some point?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe so. I'll follow up with staff tomorrow and get back to you, but I do believe something's coming forth.
Okay, I'll look for it. Hopefully it's at the next meeting. If not, well, I think that I'll be looking to refer the report to the budget committee, but thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. No further questions on the committees. Seeing none, we've got the noted conflict for Councillor Littleton. So I need a mover and a seconder, Councillor McPherson and Councillor Porter. And all in favor, show of hands. Yeah, we've got you noted as conflict. Okay, that's carried. Okay, we do have a couple of closed session items. We will be moving into closed session regarding the Meridian Center lease agreement. And this is pursuant to bylaw 2021-124, section H3.1F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, as well as Niagara District Airports Operations RFP negotiations. And this is pursuant to bylaw 2021-124, section H3.1A, a trade secret or scientific, technical, commercial, financial, labor relations information supplied in confidence to the municipality or board, which, if disclosed, could reasonably be expected to prejudice significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the contractual or other negotiations of a person, group of persons, or organizations. And K, a plan, position, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or by the board on behalf of the municipality. So the deputy clerk is going to read a disclaimer, and then I'll need a motion to go into in camera.
By attending the closed session, each member acknowledges that their obligations under the Code of Conduct, including responsibilities related to the confidentiality of closed session materials and discussions, remain the same as if they were physically present at the meeting. This includes that members are not permitted to record the proceedings and must ensure that no other person can see or hear any of the confidential deliberations taking place.
Okay, so I need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Harris, Councillor Garcia, all in favor, show of hands. And that is carried. Let's go in camera. So councillors on Zoom, you'll be moved in by our council coordinator. All right, we're back, and we just got a couple motions that come from in camera. The first one is 14.1, Office of the City of the Chief Administrative Officer Meridian Center lease agreement, and the council approved the staff recommendation contained in the report. I have Councillor Phillips moving, Councillor Littleton seconding, and all in favor? That's carried. The next one is the 14.2, Office of the CAO, Niagara District Airport Operations Negotiations on RFP. Council approved the staff recommendation contained in the report. And I need a mover and a seconder for that one. I forget that was Councillor Kushner and Councillor Harris. And I'll look to the clerk to raise hands. All in favor? And we got everyone in favor there. Okay, reading of the bylaws. Now, there is one bylaw that I have declared a conflict on, and the deputy clerk has made note of that, so that the bylaws be signed on council agenda A through J, be read a first time, considered and passed. They be signed and executed by the mayor and or deputy mayor and the deputy clerk. And I need a motion to move the bylaws. Councillor McPherson and Councillor Dodge. All in favor? It's carried. And there is no further business, items of business. This meeting is now adjourned. I need a motion to adjourn. Councillor Kushner and Councillor Williamson. Thank you very much. All in favor? And we're out of here. Thank you very much, Council. Great meeting, and look forward to seeing everybody. Have a great May long weekend, everybody. Maybe we'll see you at the carousel.